This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples Truths. Justice for all. The most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Taishu, Shadana Lai, Halito, Leslie, how are you? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Halito, Chimichukma.
You are just as beautiful as ever.
Oh, thank you. Because you know what I looked like before I came on the broadcast.
No, I'm not in that one.
Let's do our land acknowledgement before we get into our conversation tonight. But good to see you.
You as well. Go right ahead, please.
Let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of the lands that we reside on, and especially their ancestors, descendants, and all indigenous people who live now and have ever lived on this land that we call Turtle Island and beyond. Where I reside right now, this is the land of the Lenape, and I believe also for you as well, right, Elder Jay?
Yes, yes.
But more than acknowledgement, let's honor and support our existing indigenous communities by helping them continue their land-based practices, traditions, and way of life by dispelling false narratives about the history and people while promoting their authentic truths, helping them heal from past wrongs and offenses, and assisting them in protecting and restoring back to health and land, nature, and water, which brings life.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We got one exciting guest on tonight, and I've been on this woman for a long time, and she's just as pretty as you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to have her on. She does not know how much of an influence she has been in my journey. So I just am really excited that she's here today.
And her name is SHONDA Buchanan. Can we bring her in?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Hi, what an honor. Thank you so much for your kind words and for having me on the show. I'm grateful that I've done any kind of influencing on anybody.
You've done a lot.
You have. Can I just interject in, when I was doing my rediscovery of my heritage, one of the first things that came up outside of me finding Jay was you. I saw a picture of you and about your book and your experiences and stuff. And it just was such, literally, my heart was just like, I had an instant affinity to you. And so to have you here and to have seen you on other broadcasts, it's an amazing thing for me. So,
thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm honored to be on the same screen with the two of you all.
Wow. I am too, Jay. I'm honored to be on the same screen with you, founder of the Coalition of Black Indians that you founded?
Yeah. The National Congress of Black American Indians.
The Black American Indians. That was a feat. I remember, I know we're going to have a conversation about intersections, but I remember the event that you and your people put together in what was that, DC or Maryland many years ago at that church?
Yeah, DC. Yeah.
And it was amazing. We were there, Wyanoke Association, Anita, Hugh, we were in the house. So it was just beautiful to see everybody there who claimed Black Indigenous ancestry.
Well, our sister, Verona Iriarte, who actually took over for a while. We lost her about 3 weeks ago to breast cancer.
Oh, bless her.
My heart is still broken, but she's up there watching us. She's up there with the rest of the star people.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about you.
So I'll introduce myself with a song because I like to make sure I'm honoring these ways and my ancestors. And just a really quick, brief song. It's a song that I learned in the Sweat Lodge, and it's a song that I keep with me because I always need what the song gives to me, which is patience. It's a song for the mouse of the South, and I'll just give one push up, as we say in
Go
powwow.
right ahead. Go right ahead. Mhm.
Hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you. And that's a song for the mouse of the South. And we sing that in the lodge to counsel that patience that we need in ourselves as well. And I
Mhm.
learned that song over 20 years. Gosh, I know my daughter's 33, so it has to be like 25 years ago.
I
Um,
I remember that song.
yeah. Beautiful, beautiful song. So, and it's medicine, you know. Uh,
Mhm.
songs are medicine.
Speaking of the Yanipi, um, I think it was like 25 years ago when my friend Frank King was being named as one of the new Lakota Treaty Chiefs.
Mm,
My name came up in the ceremony. So Arvel Looking Horse looked at him and says, "You know Nightwolf?" He said, "Of course I know him. Every time I go to Washington, D.C., I stay at his house and I eat his food, and he makes the best grits in the world." He says, "Well, I want you." And then Crow Dog was sitting there beside him.
wow.
Crow Dog said, "Yeah, Frank, you take him the authority
Mm,
to have an Inipi on his land." So
mm,
I've had it for 25 years, and according to custom, every 13 moons we have to take it down and rebuild it.
hmm
So
hmm
whenever you're out here, you don't have to stay out west to sit in the Inipi.
Yeah, thank you.
And you all,
Thank you. I'm so grateful. And Mumu Fresh is doing redoing their what is it, Eagle, Mother Eagle
yeah.
in Maryland. Yeah, so on I just saw it a couple of days ago online that she is like breathing new energy into that space, and she redid the geodastic dome or whatever.
Mhm.
And so I believe she's going to have lodges on the land as well. You should have Mumu Fresh on your show.
I know, I know her and Mama Natasha, her mother.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I've known them for years. I knew Mumu when she was a young girl.
Wow, that's beautiful. And she's all up there now, just doing her thing and just incredibly beautiful. I want to say, what an honor it is to have danced with her in a powwow circle, in Charles
Hmm.
City, danced with her sister, her
Hmm.
mom. Uh, I think one of the reasons I do what I do as a writer, as a poet, as an educator, is because I didn't see anyone writing a memoir or writing. So, for example, my memoir is Black Indian, which I have here. My
Hmm.
first book, though, Who's Afraid of Black Indians? Let me see if I can get that. Yeah, Who's Afraid of Black Indians?
Hmm.
That one actually came out of a bit of a fight that I had at the Chickahominy powwow in
Okay.
Virginia.
Hmm.
And and so as a writer, I fight with my words, and I want to pass down tradition, and I want to pass down moments that we as a people need to remember. And so that's why I do the work that I do, and particularly looking at the intersections of African Americans and American Indians.
You got so many people out here that are so misinformed. Um, and I have to go through this trip with them of explaining that over 50,000 years ago, Africans came here as free people. They were the Phoenicians. They didn't come here to marginalize anybody or take anything from anybody. They had heard stories about these people on the other side of that big pond, the Atlantic Ocean, and they came here. And but a lot of people don't know the history. They came here, 3 people, and they didn't come here to fight with us. They came because they wanted to see who these people were that everybody on the other side of the ocean was talking about. So that
You know, can I interject there? Because in doing my research, one of the things that was astounding to me is first depictions of what Europeans drew of the people that were native to this land. And there's always been this debate about who was here first. The representation of people were dark-skinned people, and they describe them as having dark skin, almost like tar, with like shorter blunt haircuts. And unfortunately, what has happened is our phenotype has identified us as being Black, and the census has also diminished us, basically, genocide of a people, and the construct of race itself being very new. Most of us who are, representative of what we might call as African American and Black are actually of Native heritage. And it's so hard for people to wrap their heads around that truth.
Yeah, because
so sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
Before the white man came, we were dark to medium brown people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. Go ahead, Shonda. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you.
No, I was just thinking about what you all were saying, and in terms of the 50,000 year presence, in my work, I don't go back that far. I'm a traditionalist. I'm ceremonialist. I am very much a person looking at the heritage and the inheritance from my generation. So I've gone back 13 generations on the my American Indian side, on my mom's side, my mom's mom's side, and my mom's dad's side. So on my mom's side, we have Kahari from Sampson County, North Carolina. In fact, one of those manuals fought in the Revolutionary War. And I always say, I'm like, I should join the Daughters of the Revolution. Revolution. I was like, I should shake things up a bit.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, because we fought in those wars as Indigenous and African people. So on that's on my mom's side, and on my mom's dad's side, I went back to the Eastern Band Cherokee. Also, one of my great aunts did the family history. She has a family chart that says we're also Delaware, Cherokee, and Pequot. Cherokee. So it's like, I'm sorry, Pequot, not Pequot, Cherokee. And then I just did my African ancestry of my maternal line. And can I tell you, Jay, I am so happy that they traced it back to the Minde of Sierra Leone on my mom's maternal line. And so that heritage, from what they say, goes back 2,000 years. And so I'm like tearing up just thinking about that. I had to do all that history on my American Indian side because we don't have that as Black Indian people. Nobody correlated that except William Lawrence Katz, right? He was one of the first people. And then another one of our scholars, he did African peoples, red and African peoples. Why am I blanking on him? I know who he is. UC Davis.
William Lawrence, Dr. Jack D. Forbes.
Yes, Forbes. So those, like, Forbes was on the scholarship side, Katz was on the historian side, but we weren't taught that in school.
No.
Why weren't we taught that? So
their intention when they came across the ocean was to take everything we had and to exterminate the Indian.
Erasure.
Yeah.
So, can I ask a question? What do you all feel is going to be, now that we have like Governor DeSantis and stuff putting bills in place that would, what they would consider eliminate critical race theory, how does that diminish these authentic stories, these truths? In what way does that play a part?
It can't diminish it because, first of all, we know who we are and we know our history. You know, on my mother's side, my people are Cherokee from South Carolina. On my father's side, my father's father, grandpa, was a Western Shoshone from out around the Four Corners, and his wife, my grandma Sylvia, she was Taino Arawak from Puerto Rico. So how you going to erase that? Walter Plecker was the biggest fool that I ever knew about, and the Santas. Oh my God, what they're trying to do, they don't want their white children to know what they actually did to us or to anybody else. That's what it is.
Yeah. You know, I think for me, because I have the privilege of being an educator, I have the privilege of being a griot, of being a storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
and straddling, I guess, which would be like higher ed. I teach at Loyola Marymount University and Alma College in the creative writing program
Mm-hmm.
at Alma College. But then also I'm a storyteller, I'm a griot. So everything that I do is critical race theory. You know, I teach from that lens of, in fact, it's interesting. My thesis when I was getting my what was it, my BA, my master's in English. My master's in English was teaching from a Black pedagogy,
Mm-hmm.
and I took that and I went to Hampton University and I taught at Hampton for 13 years, and it was magical to be able to talk about what African Americans contributed to America, how far back we go, you know, from the African perspective, just dealing with everything that is critical race theory. So it will never be erased for me. I
No,
curate.
it's a social construct.
It is.
It is.
I
Yeah.
wish they would ban my books. The more that they try to ban or erase something, the more it will erupt. Like how
Yeah.
they're trying to banning Amanda Gorman's poem, a
Mm-mm.
woman who basically didn't read. It just offended her.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, but does history offend you? Have you looked at your grandfathers and your grandmothers and what has happened? You know, is that offensive? So, and so we're all talking about it.
I think that the hardest thing right now is dismantling the untruths in history, and getting those stories out there, those authentic stories. And I always tell people that there's no reason to be ignorant today when you have everything at the drop of your hands. I mean, you know, at the touch of your hands, that you can research yourself and come to your own conclusion. The mentality, the dismantling of years of indoctrination that was false is the biggest problem that we face. It's not the elimination of that history, it's the indoctrination of that false history.
So, Shonda, how do you identify?
I identify as Afro-Indigenous, Black Indian, Red Black,
Mm-hmm.
and then I also acknowledge the European ancestry in me. You know, I've done the DNA, so I see where that, you know, the ancestry. What is really interesting, having done the DNA, the first time that I got my 23andMe, you know, results, it said that I had some Ashkenazi Jewish in me. And I was like, well, who is that? Like, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's modified, so that disappeared. But then some Afghanistan popped up and some Filipino popped up. And I'm like, so when I look at my DNA, I'm like, I'm truly a global citizen. Like I'm truly a citizen of this world. But in terms of how I was raised, how culturally I was indoctrinated, how I identify, and how I have learned to redefine myself, I identify as Afro-Indigenous.
Now, can I ask a question about that, as being someone who now also identifies as such? What kind of flack have you gotten as a result of explaining that to other people that you're Afro-Indigenous? Especially, well, first of all, Caucasian people, and then secondly, Native people. What happens when you say that?
So I introduced this book, Who's Afraid of Black Indians, by saying this book came from a fight. It's a collection of poetry. It's my first book of poetry. I was dancing at the Chickahominy powwow when they it was the 400 or 500 year anniversary of the Chickahominy and the British deciding that there was homage that needed to be paid. So a bunch of like Brits were here. There's at the powwow. The Charles City officials, mayor, etc., was at the powwow. And so I've sang on drums at this powwow before. I have danced in the powwow before, but this particular day, they said, we only want people who are carded. I was like, oh, okay, well, let me respect that. I won't dance. But then I saw my Seminole brother was out there. He didn't have a card. My Cheyenne sister was out there. She didn't have a card. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is it because I'm visibly Afro-Indigenous that I can't dance? I was like, okay, let me not be disrespectful. And then they called for intertribal. And I said, okay, it's intertribal. Anyone can go out. I'm going to go ahead and dance. When I was dancing in that circle next to my Cheyenne sis, right behind, actually, one of my Sioux brothers, Danny, was dancing too. And I felt them looking at me, and I was like, uh-oh, it's about to be a fight. But I'm from Michigan. I'm good. I can I can handle this.
There you go.
I came out. They attacked me, and the sub chiefs and the chiefs, and they were like men, and they said, you shouldn't, dance. We told you not to dance. So I had to educate them, from what I knew. And I was like, wait a minute, we look like each other. I know that you've had to go out west to replenish your Indianness, like you have, so why is this a fight? So that's one response to your question, is that even those who know that we are intermixed, that we are mixed race, if they have a kind of official doctrine, the tribal enrollment card, that gives them a kind of privilege. But as from what we do, Jay, and Les, what you do, I'm sorry, I apologize, Les. It says Ellie, yes, Les. Okay, Les, what you do, we get to talk from a different perspective and share and educate from a different perspective to say, this is our lived history. This is our lived experience, and you cannot take that from us. So when people say to me, why don't you just claim Black? And I'm like, why? Why would I do that? I've had African Americans say to me, do you think you're better than us? And I'm like, did I ever say that I thought I was better than you? I am following my history. And then I have had Indigenous people say the same thing. Why don't you just say Indian?
Can I say something about that?
Hmm?
I too have dealt with that in a work setting. Outside of what I do here on Jay Winter Nightwolf, I also work within, I would say, our DEI communities within. And when I was asked to join, when I joined our employee resource group for our Native people, I noticed they asked what affiliation we were. And the first thing that I put down was Afro-Indigenous. There was no one else that had put that down there. So I realized at that point that this is a conversation that needed to be had in my workplace.
Yes.
However, what has happened as a result of that is that I've had comments in front of other people where they don't identify me as Indigenous. And I feel there's a certain entitlement for people who have lived an Indigenous life, who've lived that life, to say these things to people that don't look phenotypically like they do, or the representation, the false representation of what they really are. Because everybody is mixed right now. And then how they identify themselves as being full blood or whatever, which is like the craziest thing I've ever seen, because we know for a fact that that means nothing. Yes,
the FBI, full blood Indians.
But I say all this because what really shuts them down when I make this commentary about being Afro-Indigenous is that I tell them my story. I tell them that I am now, of my family, the oldest living matriarch of this side of my family. And when my mother passed away, the onus was upon me to tell our history and our stories. And there were things that I came across in my family history that shook me to my core and broke my heart. And one of those things is that we have totally neglected our Indigenous side, a woman who was very instrumental in the survival of my grandfather. And so to not honor this woman, because now she's a beautiful family under her, I hope she's watching with the Creator right now. Mm-hmm. She has a beautiful family under her. I said, when I meet this woman face to face one day, I don't want her to ever say to me that you forgot me.
Exactly.
And it was important for me to say that. And that usually shuts people up when I say that.
Exactly. And that's the tradition, that's the 7 generations. We're supposed to live with the 7 generations in our sphere, in our mind, we're not just living for ourselves, we're living for the people. So our memories have to hold the people and all of us, right? And it's interesting because, and I don't want to I'm not throwing shade at Full Blood. So forgive me if anyone is like, wait a minute, you come and hang out with us. And so don't think I'm throwing shade. I'm only for those people who will try to take away my identity as an Afro-Indigenous person. So that's what I'm speaking directly to. But I've had people just embrace me. I've had so many people just embrace me because I have learned the ways. I have just been respectful to the best of my ability. I have participated in ceremonies in a good way, and so I've been really, really lucky. But what's interesting is that for me, that journey has been intertwined with my family story, right? And so my family story is that my people's people migrated from North Carolina and Virginia.
Yep.
Migrated is a bit of a misnomer word because, as you all know, migration sometimes is forced migration.
Right.
So for people of color, it was like, wait a minute, we can't carry arms anymore in the city? So wait a minute, you're trying to take away our land? We have to pay tax on the mixed race woman that I married, or you know what I mean? And so it's like, well, let's just pack up and we're going to get on the road. But every state that they settled in Tennessee, they didn't want them in Tennessee, ostracized. Settle in Kentucky, didn't want them in Kentucky. In Ohio, some of my folks went to Ohio. Ohio would make you pay tax as a free person of color when you entered and when you left. So it was like no one wanted the mixed race people. And finally they settled, my people, I don't know about anyone else's, but we settled in Indiana. We started some of the first free people of color settlements in Indiana, and we knew we were African and indigenous. And then traded with the Quakers. Shout out to the Quakers who traded with my people and helped my folks. And then that group of the Robert Stafford's Manuals went to Michigan and settled some of the first free people of color settlements next to the Potawatomi, Anishinaabe, Odawa, Ojibwe, who were there already. So, shout out to those nations who embraced us and helped us as well.
Okay. Let me get back to what you mentioned about your experience about dancing at a powwow. I went to a powwow, I think I was maybe 15 years ago, here in Maryland with the Piscataway Indians. Now, this is a group that until recently, they just got state recognized. I pull up in the parking lot and they send one of the guys out to give me a talking to. He says, I need to see your Indian card. I said, you need to see what? Your Indian card. I said, what is an Indian card? Your tribal card. So I looked at him. I said, your people have no recognition from the white man anywhere. So how the hell can you ask me for my card? Let me see your card. Well, the parking is free if you got it. No, I'm parking in anyway. If I see a tow truck come up to my car, they're going to be towing you away in the ambulance. The ignorance of some of our people that haven't done the research or anything or any historical research on who they are. It burns me.
Yeah. And that's he should know it's so those kinds of interactions, what I have seen in Indian country over the last, like I said, 25, 30 years that I have been really, really, walking that road, walking the red road, those are conversations that need to be had. So he basically could have said, hey, brother, who are you? Where do you come from? That's all he had to say.
When I go anywhere in the United States, the first thing people ask me, who's your family?
Yes, that's the thing I was going to say, especially within our Native brothers and sisters that have embraced our identity. The first thing they ask is who your people. Who are your people? And once you know that, then if you're supposed to be in the right place. Shonda, my experience has been similar to you. I've been embraced in the community. I sit on a board for the community and stuff like that. But once again, I find myself in a situation where I have to explain why I don't look your typical look, and why I am there representing my people. And it's about me respecting my culture, respecting my ancestors.
We are not Hollywood Indians, period.
No, not anything like that.
I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
All right.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is very interesting to me is before you came into the discussion, I was talking about how I identify myself as an actor now and how I've been reshaping my image as an actor. And this has started some very uncomfortable conversations within the industry because we don't always see our representation of Black Indigenous. We see, a Res Dog representation or Spirit Rangers representation or everything. And me of Choctaw heritage, that's a mixed culture. It's a very intersected culture due to slavery and just due to us marrying it, and also how we look. There are a lot of dark Choctaws, and they are Choctaw. No matter no African blood, whatever. They just dark. So
I told a woman that last weekend. I did a talk last weekend, and she came up to me and she said, they say we got Choctaw in my family, but I don't look Indian. And I looked at her. She's a beautiful dark skin, and I was like, sis. So I've been in ceremony with Choctaw, that's on my dad's side, Choctaw. I've been there. They look like us. They look like you. She's like, really? I was like, yeah, just go there. Go to Oklahoma. Go to go to their powwows. You'll see yourself. And that's what we have to tell everyone, I think, is if all the messages that I have in my work, the one message that I would say is find your people. Find your tribe. Go to the powwows that are open to the ceremony. Start talking to the vendors. Ask if you think that you're from that nation or from that tribe. Tell the vendor who could also be from the nation or the tribe who your people are. What I have learned is blood calls blood. And when you show up,
yes,
you show up, and suddenly your ancestors like, you're supposed to be here.
Yeah.
You are supposed to find me.
Nothing is uncomfortable to you when you go into that scenario. If you go to a powwow, there is nothing uncomfortable. You just know. It's just like spirit calls spirit, blood calls blood. Mother Earth calls you. You know that you're in the right place.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
That is so true.
I'm working on another book. A couple of books. I'm working on a second memoir, which is about spirituality and relationships and divorce. I've been divorced twice. And I'm also working on a book about my people who did migrate. So the 6 branches of my family that migrated from North Carolina. I want to tell the what happened. I want to tell how some of those laws reclassified us. You know what I mean? And I want to put a stick pin on the map. And hopefully those books can be used in classes. Like this book that I'm working on can be used in a class to say, oh, that's a hidden history. That's a hidden why didn't we know that? And because of those moments, this is what Toni Morrison says, because of those moments of classification, reclassification, being ostracized, white people have had to redefine who they are in opposition to their oppression of us, of people of color, right? And that's why we have a DeSantos now. That's why we have it, because he has learned to define himself and his people in opposition to people of color and what we bring to the table.
Even Trump did that. Remember when he went after the Pequots?
Trump.
Oh my God. Yeah. So anybody that's foolish enough to vote for him or DeSantos or any of these other idiots that sat in Capitol Hill that refuse to get rid of taking money from the NRA and getting these guns out of our streets and out of our communities, shame on you.
Exactly. And this is why critical race theory is important to have and to keep. And this is why we need to make sure that we're inserting it wherever we can as educators, even if you have to be covert about, teaching your kindergartners and your first and your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, K through 12. You can be a little covert. You can bring in a Maya Angelou poem.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
not banned yet. Whatever's not banned, bring that in and continue to teach about the multifaceted face of America.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
let's talk about that, because I wanted to talk about the census in particular. The census, which is was created, I believe, in the late 1600s.
Seven,
What
17, I have it in my book. 1720.
1720.
I'm sorry, 1790. My apologies.
Okay, 1790. So a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of us who were of mixed heritage were identified as such under the term mulatto, because they didn't know what our race was. I encourage people to look at this transition, especially people who know they have Native heritage, how it went from being of mixed blood or indigenous blood to mixed heritage to Negro to Black and then African American. And sad to say that a lot of us died out as far as how we were classified in the census. The other thing too that's really important that I want people to understand, and when we talk about this, is people who have not been put on the roll, but they have family members who went to try to get on the dolls roll. And I had a very interesting conversation with a sister recently, and she was saying to me that her family, and she looks different than I do. She's of Mexican heritage. Mm-hmm. She said that her family went to petition on the dolls roll and they were denied. They were rejected. Mm-hmm. And she says, we were rejected because we weren't Indian enough, or because we were married to somebody that was Black, or who they identified as Black. And she says, but what people don't realize is, she says, and I hope that one day, even our tribal people will see this, is that nobody in their right mind would have taken that journey to Oklahoma during the time to claim, when they were killing indigenous people, to claim that they were indigenous, except somebody who had a rightful claim to that heritage. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about that in particular, because one of our biggest killers of indigeneity and our people as a whole, because we are dying out, people are not marrying or intermarrying with the tribe, was that census and the dolls roll. What do you see as the future of that eventually, when what is being Native or identified as Native America is eventually going to die out?
So for the audience, she referenced the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, the Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and the Seminole, who were officially put on the Trail of Tears in 1830, between 1830 and 32, but it actually started in 1828. That's when Andrew Jackson's people really started giving their notices that we're going to move you forcibly if you don't move yourselves. So that is the Indian removal from the southeast into Oklahoma and Alabama, which is what they designated Indian Territory, which is why we have so many American Indian tribes in those areas. So here's the thing. When you said, will that mixed raciality or mixed indigeneity melt away or fall away, it cannot, because it's in our blood. So those nations, those 5 civilized tribes, many of them owned Black slaves. In my book, I've actually got the numbers. So I think I say something like, let me try to find the actual numbers. The Creek, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw were some of the worst slave masters, in fact,
Yeah.
But I'll find the number in a minute. But they owned and they lived with and they married, African peoples. So that is in our blood. I have been on ceremonial grounds where I still see in mixed race people. So one of our when I go to Montana, there's a man there who is a beautiful tall brother whose father is African American. His mom is indigenous Gravon. So I see us still. That will never die out because it's in our blood. And I think we're still mixing. I see us. I see us out here.
I need to make a point. Somebody just wrote Mexicans were Chino slaves. That's a bunch of crap. Mexicans and everybody south of Texas are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. They had tribes like we had. They had tribal councils, everything. And if you want to get crazy about it, well, where was Geronimo born? In Mexico.
Right.
Let's also mention the fact that the indigenous people that were in Mexico that have been reclassified as Mexican, not Indian, Mexican, they were identifying them as a new race under the Hispanic moniker.
Right.
So, you know, what you think is Chino slaves is not slavery. Mexico was against slavery from the get-go, and many of us fled to Mexico and have interbred with people from the South Turtle Island area where there were African peoples before. And that is a mixture. I have a girlfriend who is from Veracruz. When I ask her where she is, she distinctly tells me she is African and she's native. So there we go. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I got to tell folks that there's no such thing as a Latino. Latin is the language that the Catholic Church used to do their dirt against people in the Western Hemisphere purposely. And you have to go back to Walter Plecker. He was an idiot. I mean, you know, there's been so many so-called authorities that don't identify with anything but being white. If you go to Italy and you call somebody from Italy a white man, he'll tell you, hell no, I'm Northern African. So, you know, he's playing on words and this white man's decree of who is and who ain't. I completely ignore that. I recognize it.
Let's answer True right here. So True, to some extent, that may be some truth as far as those people who might have migrated there, but there is definite African heritage proof there, and that goes far back. I would recommend that you watch Black Before Columbus, and you will then know that there is African heritage in Mexico. That they have been there and had visited there over 50,000 years ago. And if you do a DNA test of most Mexicans, it will come up trace African heritage.
True, you need to read between the lines, seriously, and understand who you are, where you're from, and who was there eons ago before you were born. And then you can find out.
And you can also look up Yanga. Yanga is an African warrior that they revere in the southern part of Mexico, and they have a statue for him. Veracruz, you can look up Black Mexicans or Black Mexican villages, and there are 3 that I know of. I think there's even a school, like a Martin Luther King school, in one of those villages. A friend of mine used to go down there, and he would take pictures of the Black Mexicans. So do your due diligence.
What I find to be interesting here is the denouncing of African heritage here, and I really would like to see your proof, True, of where you find this truth, because I could give you 10 books that will tell you differently. But there's nothing wrong with having African heritage. It is still indigenous heritage no matter what. It's indigenous. Africa, as we know it, of course, is a name that was given to Africa as we know it by Europeans. But that DNA does not lie. So please show me your proof, and then we can have a discussion about it. But right now, all you're doing is spewing a lot of information that can't back up. All right.
Please.
Do we have any more comments or questions from our audience members? We'd really like to have this discussion.
Yes.
There are some questions that were given to Elder Nightwolf and some of my friends.
Something that makes sense.
Can you ask some of those questions of Shonda, please?
I don't see any questions.
Yeah, actually, there's a question. I gave Elder Nightwolf some questions.
It says, if I'm a reconnector, what is the first thing I must be made aware of when reconnecting with the indigenous community?
So when you say reconnector, what do you mean by that, reconnector?
I think it's somebody who is actually going back and reclaiming their heritage.
Oh, so I think I did answer that in terms of showing up to the powwows, the gatherings, the green corn dances, even the museums. You know, the American Indian Museum in D.C. They have celebration ceremonies sometimes, and they'll focus on like specific tribes, or they'll have a specific event, and then all the folks who are artists will show up or singers will show up. So go to the museums and just start asking, like, when will this tribe come? When will these people come through and show up if you think that those are your folks? And then also, I would say there's a document called the African Cherokee Rolls. It is the man who put that together is Guion Miller, so they also call it the Guion Miller Rolls. I also would like to say that each of the 5 civilized tribes who were forced into Indian removal also each had their own roles. You can find some of those in the Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to say it's the Hall of Records. Hall of Records. I have it at the back of my book, at the back of Black Indian. And then, so each of those, like the Choctaw had their own roles, the Chickasaw had their own roles. So, and then the Dawes roles is just a culmination of them. But if you can find the roles of those tribes too, maybe you'll find your people on those. National Archives in Washington, D.C., you have to do a lot of work to find your people there. And even though I have found documents that said this person is mulatto or this person comes from this area, I have literally had an African researcher there laugh in my face and say, "You're not Indian?" And I was like, "I didn't ask you if I was Indian. I asked you, can you help me find this document?" So sometimes, again, you'll just have to kind of step over people who are ignorant of what you are trying to do, which is reclaim your heritage and reclaim your history and your people.
A lot of doors to find the truth. And they couldn't back my daughter into a wall because, first of all, she's a U.S. veteran and she knows the truth about who we are. And the God told her, "What you're looking for is over there in that drawer. Don't tell him I told you." And he was a Black Indian.
Wow. Wow. Someone, what did she say?
Well, I wanted to answer this one more time for her, but I think she missed the beginning of our program.
Oh.
And let me just say that we know that all Negro, people who have been labeled a Negro, are not African. We know that a lot of people who were phenotypically represented as Negro here in America were actually of indigenous heritage. When you do go back and rewatch the broadcast, then you will understand why we are having this conversation. But we did not say that all Negro are considered African. There are many of us who were not ever slaves, but were captured and put into slavery because we looked Black.
Yes.
Yes. And you know what?
Misidentified and misclassified as African American when we were actually indigenous to this country.
So that, can I say 2 things? The book, the what I just said, the African Cherokee Rolls, you have to look for that. And I have a copy of it myself. When I have gone to try to find it again, I can't find it. So I was lucky that I printed the whole thing out. And my people are on the African Cherokee Rolls. Print out the documents as you are researching, because sometimes they will disappear. Patrick Mingus has a book called Black Indian Narratives.
Yes.
Which he pulled together from WPA interviews of people who said, Les, to your point, I'm Indian, I'm full-blood Indian. I was washing clothes by the river with my grandmother, and the soldiers came and snatched us up and put us on a plantation.
Yeah, and let me just say that about my family. I do not see any African slaves in the last 5 or 6 generations of my family.
Mhm.
So this goes to tell you that most of us who have been identified, and like I said before, I saw that reclassification in the census of what my grandfather was, who was indigenous, being classified as Black. So a lot of us have not. If you think about the percentages of what they say have been brought over here as African slaves, the percentage does not amount to the amount of people who were representative of were phenotypically Black in America. They were indigenous. A lot of people were indigenous, but because they looked Black, slave drivers came, grabbed them, put them on plantations, and that was that. Then we were identified in the census. And there was a distinct separation between who was indigenous, who was Black, and who was white, and anything else other than that.
And to that point, before there was a Trail of Tears where they marched the Cherokees out to Oklahoma, Black folks had been a part of that tribe, and they called them freedmen.
Mhm.
And I had a big argument. Of course, I had Dr. Jack D. Forbes on my side, but the former chief of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, he was going to the casino getting money to prove his point that there were no Black Indians. So we shot him down, and I told him on that broadcast that night, I said, I know a lot of people in the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and they got the truth. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to see to it that you never get elected as the chief of the Cherokee Nation again. He told me, you don't know what you're talking about. I had a list of over 100,000 people that didn't live in Cherokee anymore.
Wow.
Got in touch with them, told them about Chad. His name was Chad Smith. Told him about Chad Smith and what he was trying to do. He never got elected again.
Well,
Wow.
now the Cherokees have eliminated any bi blood or blood quantum from their roles now. And let's not even mention, I mean, we're talking about our Southeast indigenous people from the 5 civilized tribes, but we have to talk about our East Coast indigenous people who have been intermarrying for centuries.
Yeah.
So, and we had Mr. Bongo's grandson on here. We can talk about Crispus Attucks, who was identified as Black in our history books, but he was indigenous and of African heritage. There are so many of us that have been misclassified in history as just being Black, with our indigeneity being completely wiped out.
Can I tell you, I give lectures on the Black. So I actually do a talk on hidden Black Indian figures, but not just in America. They want to know about this in Amsterdam, in France, in Malaysia. Like, they want to know, like, so what is this mixed raciality? Like, what is this? And so I give talks and lectures on the history, the trail, the intersections, and I'm every time it's fascinating to me. I love it. But in my mind, I think, why don't we know this? Why isn't this something that is as known as the story of George Washington? Why isn't the family of Bongo or the family of Diana Fletcher or the history of, oh my goodness, we can even talk about the Lovings, Mildred Loving, who identified as Rappahannock. And she was, the only reason we call her Black is because she was labeled colored. And the word colored has its own historical journey. So, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was led to do this, by my ancestors to say, tell them who we are. Never let them forget.
That's right. That's right. So I think we're getting close to the twilight hour, right?
Yeah, we've got about 3 minutes, but I wanted to give Shonda an opportunity to do a quick, real brief, comment to our audience, and then have you say your goodbyes as well, Jay. So, Shonda, is there anything that you would like to tell our audience members?
Please follow me on social media so you can see when I am giving talks and lectures and events. And I do a lot of, I'm giving a poetry event, a Black Lives Matter poetry event on August 25th at Grand Performances in downtown Los Angeles. I'll be doing other events in October. Actually, I'll be in North Carolina in October. Jay, I'll give you that information. But I'm always willing to come to your library, to your museum, to, what your university, your college in your area. Just, DM me, please. Email me, shondabuchanan@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Shonda.
Thank
And
you.
I've loved you for a long time.
Thank you, Jay. I have been just enamored with you and your wife. Thank you so much.
And also, Leslie, I love you.
Yes, I know you do.
So let me give you my closing words. And I want all of you watching this to pay attention. It's not about the color of your skin or the color of your eyes. It's not about the clothes you wear. It's not about your tradition or your culture. Do you know what it's really all about? It's how you treat my heart. And remember this, your brother or your sister don't necessarily have to look like you to be your brother or your sister. So who is your brother? Who is your sister? The one that gives you the right treatment for your heart. And I'll leave you with these words in Cherokee. Danada, goai, wado. Until next time, I love you all of you, even those of you that make it almost impossible to love. I love you in spite of yourselves. And remember, you were put on earth to help each other. So be about the business of helping each other and stop tearing each other down. That's a bunch of crap and you know it. Talk to you later.